Yeah, this is Dave Rempis coming to you from the Edgewater neighborhood of Chicago. My practice space here in the third floor of a very hot church since it's 95 degrees out here in Chicago today. So my shirt is already soaked through before we even started, so it should be a fun, sweaty night tonight. Thanks for tuning in. This is the 14th in a series of Wednesday night concerts that I've been doing during the COVID era, doing a solo stream each week and also releasing a brand new digital release on my record label Aerophonic Records, which you can find online at aerophonicrecords.com right there. There's a lot of great hard copy releases up there, and if you look under the digital releases tab of the website, you'll find all of the weekly digital releases that have been coming out. Last week I put out a record called Harmattan with myself, the great Russ Johnson on trumpet, Joshua Abrams on bass, Isaiah Spencer and Jeremy Cunningham both on drums. That's a really nice 40-minute piece that was recorded here in Chicago about a year and a half ago at a club called The Whistler. And 2 weeks ago, I put out a record called Sugar Shack with Terry X, the great Dutch guitarist from the punk band The X, and Tim Daisy on drums. That was recorded in 2013 up in Milwaukee at the Sugar Maple as part of their yearly Oka Fest up there. And that release is a fundraiser for the incredible ensemble and cultural space in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Fendika, which is an amazing ensemble based there that Terry has a very long-standing relationship with, and that also played Oka Fest in 2013. So please check those records out online at aerophonicrecords.com. Tonight I decided to only bring my alto saxophone. I've done some other weeks just playing tenor and just playing baritone, so it felt like it was time to give the alto a chance. This is actually the first horn I started on way back in 1983 when I was 8 years old. I've actually owned this very alto saxophone since December of 1987. I've been playing on the same horn that whole time, so 33 years on this instrument. And yeah, I figured I'd devote this evening's concert to exploring the alto a little bit. So I'm going to start tonight with just an improvisation on the horn. So thanks so much for joining me. Thanks very much. That was a little alto saxophone improvisation to kick things off. I'm going to take a little sip of water just to stay nicely hydrated in this very humid, hot environment. As I mentioned, I'm on the third floor of a church with no windows and a very small room. So it's a little bit sweaty here tonight. I apologize for that. The intro music tonight as we were coming in was Von Freeman, the great Chicago tenor saxophonist and really one of the great patriarchs of the jazz scene still to this day in Chicago. Vaughn was born in 1923 and was somebody who lived in Chicago his entire life. Rich achieved some amount of renown later in his life, but he was really kind of one of those more local Chicago people who really made a name for himself here. He was actually asked to join Miles Davis's quintet, I think in the early 60s. Maybe late 50s, but passed up that opportunity to stay in Chicago and continue what he was doing. So the record we were listening to was his 1972 Atlantic release produced by Rahsaan Roland Kirk called Doing It Right Now, and we heard the title track off of that. Part of the reason I'm thinking about that is because last week I was at Constellation here in Chicago recording a set with Tamika Reed on cello and Joshua Abrams on bass. For the Chicago Jazz Festival, and that set's going to get broadcast next Thursday, September 3rd, along with a number of other current sets from Chicago artists, as well as some archival footage. And one of the archival selections that they're going to broadcast is this great recording of Von Freeman and Clifford Jordan playing with a quintet at the 1988 Chicago Jazz Festival, playing on one of the smaller stages outdoors with Willie Pickens on piano, Dan Shapira on bass, and Robert Shai on drums, all of whom musicians I had many chances to see in my younger days when they were all still living. Most of them are unfortunately now deceased. But a really heavyweight quintet that's going to be broadcast alongside our set that night on September 3rd. And that got me thinking about Vaughn a little bit and some of my own experiences with him over the years. In many ways, Fred Anderson, who was one of the, I'd say, the other patriarch of the Chicago jazz scene, was somebody a bit closer to my heart and a bit closer to the music scene that I was really a part of. But Vaughn was certainly an equal of Fred's in terms of being a mentor to so many musicians. He had a weekly Tuesday night jam session at the New Apartment Lounge on the south side of Chicago at 504 East 75th in the Greater Grand Crossing neighborhood, for those of you who know Chicago. And that was really a legendary session where so many young musicians, so many musicians from all over the world who were playing in Chicago, they would all go there after their gig to see Vaughn play, to be a part of that jam session. It was really a very special thing, and Vaughn as a presence was a very special person. The first time, not the first time, but one of the early times when I really remember seeing Vaughn play was I used to bartend at a club called the Bop Shop back in 1997. It was my first bartending job and the one that kind of got me into that industry and helped provide a living for me in my early years as a musician. And I only worked there for about 3 months. At that time, the owner, whose name was Kate Smith, she had the club in Wicker Park, which was a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood of Chicago, and she got pushed out in 1997 because her lease was up and they wanted to run it to somebody with a much bigger budget. So they pushed her out, and she initially moved up to the Andersonville neighborhood of Chicago, basically running her club out of somebody else's Middle Eastern restaurant. And I don't remember the name of the place, but it was basically the Bop Shop at whatever the name of that was. And then she that ended after a few months, about 3 months, and she moved down to the South Loop of Chicago, down at Roosevelt and Wabash. And she opened a club there in what was formerly the Cleopatra Show Lounge, which was a strip club owned by a pretty well-known Chicago restaurateur named George Mitchell, who was an old Greek guy. George lived upstairs. He had a couple of heart attacks already, was in terrible health. He was estranged from his family, who really didn't like him at all, I guess. And I was there the night that the club actually closed, which was a really sad thing to see a jazz club go down. And what actually happened was that George had another heart attack and went into the hospital, and immediately his family swooped in. I can only describe his ex-wife as this kind of like Cruella de Vil type character, and she and 2 or 3 kids all showed up, and they're all driving like little Mercedes convertible sports cars, and they just swarmed in on the place with the Chicago police. and did something I'd never heard of, which was surrendering the liquor license to the police. So they basically called the cops and said, "We don't want to be a bar anymore, we're giving you the liquor license." So they stormed in at about 7:30 on a Tuesday night when the Bop Shop was having its own jam session with Lynn Halliday, a great saxophonist in Chicago, Robert Berry on drums, and the band had, was finished setting up and was just about ready to hit when all this happened. And so it was a pretty shocking experience to see. And so after that, Kate Smith, who ran the club, was trying to pay off her bills, take care of some last things. It was pretty clear the club probably wouldn't open again, but she wanted to have a fundraiser for that, and she invited Von Freeman to come play with a quartet at this fundraiser that was at the Annoyance Theater up by Wrigley Field, where the Cubs play in Chicago. And so I went to the fundraiser, of course, as somebody who'd been working at the club for a while. And the first tune that Von called was On Green Dolphin Street. And if you lived in Chicago at that time, everybody knew Von is like the straight ahead player and Fred Anderson is the out guy, basically. That was the reputation that they both had. And so the band kicked in on this version of On Green Dolphin Street, and after the head, Von just cut the band out, and he did about a 10-minute unaccompanied solo on Green Dolphin Street. And it was honestly one of the most out things I've ever heard. He did so much in the altissimo register of the horn, doing all this kind of like squealing, screaming, extended technique stuff. His intonation was just so personal and so unique. His tone, his sense of pitch, all of it was just so unique. And so to really hear him completely exposed in the solo setting really completely blew me away. And it kind of once again reaffirmed for me that people who talk about straight ahead and outside and free jazz, like, that's all a bunch of crap. All these musicians are able to do a whole lot of things, and the reputations that they earn from media, from jazz writers, are generally totally wrong. The fact that Von generally played standards and jazz tunes through his career was, the reason that people tagged him as being the straight ahead guy, whereas Fred Anderson played his own music, didn't play jazz standards, didn't play chord changes music. But in terms of their approach on the instrument, you could very much make an argument that Von Freeman was the more sort of avant-gardist of the two in a way. But they're both beautiful, beautiful players, and very glad to have had a chance to come up in a city where they were around. So I'm going to do a version now of that tune, On Green Dolphin Street, written in the 1940s for a movie of the same name and made famous by Miles Davis on his 1958 recording of the tune. So this is On Green Dolphin Street for Von Freeman. Thanks. That was my sorry-ass version of Green Dolphin Street, or On Green Dolphin Street, I guess is technically the name of that tune. So now is normally the time of the evening when I debut the new digital release for this week. This week's release is by a working band that's one of my longest term working bands, still active. It's the Rempis Percussion Quartet, which is myself on saxophones, Ingebrigt Hokerflaten, the great Norwegian bass player, Frank Rosalie, and Tim Daisy, both on drums. That quartet's been working since 2004. I think we have about 8 records out, I want to say, currently, and so this is like the 9th or somewhere thereabouts. The title of this one is called The Long Haul, and it was recorded here in Chicago at the Hideout in 2011. I'm very excited to have this out. It was recorded during a period of the band that hasn't really been documented before. The 2 records that came out around this, one was called Montreal Parade, and that came out in 2010, and it was recorded in January of 2010, about 9 months after Ingebrigt Hokerflaten joined the band. So it was the first record with Ingebrigt on it. And then the next record didn't come out until 2013, and that record was called Phalanx, and was actually the first record that came out on Aerophonic Records, at aerophonicrecords.com. So there was a 3-year gap basically between records, and so having something that was recorded in 2011 is nice because it represents a kind of important working era of the band that hasn't really been documented so much before. As I was trying to figure this out a little bit, to figure where this recording kind of fell in the mix, and I was going back to both Montreal Parade and Phalanx to see, you know, where and when they were recorded, and looking back at the tours we'd done around that time to kind of get an idea of where this new record fit in. It reminded me of a couple things. Montreal Parade was kind of named after my love for the city of Montreal and the great clubs that I played there, particularly Casa del Popolo and Sala Rosa, which are both owned by Mauro Pesante. Mauro's the bass player in the rock band Godspeed You Black Emperor, and has run these clubs for over 20 years. They're just, as a musician, absolutely incredible places to go play, and the crowd in Montreal is always fantastic. I got to be very good friends with a number of people up there, including my friend Marilyn, who I spoke to last night and this morning. And a great story came up from, it was actually 2009 when Marilyn was down here visiting Chicago, and she came up to Okafest to see the weekend of performances up there in Milwaukee. And I don't remember who all was playing that year. I do remember Joe McPhee was there and Peter Broadsman. I think Peter played in a trio with Nashit Waits and Eric Ravis, and Joe was playing along with Peter and a couple other folks, and I think he also played a trio that year with Jeff Parker on guitar, and oh man, who was and Chad Taylor on drums. Yeah, Joe was up there. My friend Marilyn was up there, somebody who I met in Montreal, and Joe had played an afternoon set at the smaller of the 2 bars called the Palm Tavern, and he played a duo with Paul Nilsson Love, and it was truly a beautiful set. And afterwards, somebody poured him a scotch, and you know, that was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Joe does like his scotch, so he kind of started getting into it a little bit, and you know, by about 7 o'clock or so, he took a little nap at the bar before he had to play his evening gig that night, because he was pretty wiped out, probably from the heat and maybe a little bit from the scotch also. But not long before he went into his nap, he leaned over to my friend Marilyn and he said, "I'd like to dress you up like a waffle and pour maple syrup all over you," which was a incredible quote that I later turned into a title for one of the tunes that came out on Montreal Parade. That title was If You Were a Waffle and I Were a Bee. So that's for Joe McPhee and my friend Marilyn, who I hope is watching tonight. So this record came out or was recorded after that Montreal Parade record and before Phalanx. Again, a period of work by the band that really hasn't been documented before. I hope you'll check that out at aerophonicrecords.com. As always with these digital releases, the proceeds from them are split evenly between all the musicians on the record. I'm trying to figure figure out ways to make a little bit of money myself and to pay a lot of the other musicians who I normally work with and book for gigs and book for tours during this time, since most people don't have a whole lot of revenue happening right now. It doesn't generally amount to a lot of money, but if I can pay, you know, $300-400 a week out to other musicians and make a little money myself, it really helps a lot. So yeah, check those out. I'm going to play another improvised piece now, and thank you again for being here tonight. Thanks. That was another improvisation for you. So as I was preparing for tonight and thinking about Von Freeman a little bit, I started diving in on some YouTube stuff that's available out there, including that jazz festival, Chicago Jazz Festival recording from 1988 with Clifford Jordan that I mentioned. Another thing that popped up was his performance at the 2002 Berlin Jazz Festival, which I was very lucky actually to be at. I was in town at the time playing with Ken Vandermark's Territory Band, which was a large band that Ken had, featuring Ken, Friedrich Lundqvist from Sweden on saxophones, Axel Derner on trumpet, Jeb Bishop on trombone, Per-Åke Holmlander on tuba, Jim Baker on piano, Fred Longberg-Holm on cello, Kevin Drum on electronics, Kent Kessler on bass, and both Paul Litton and Paul Nilsson-Love on drums. And the first day that we arrived, we were going to be in Berlin for about 3 days for the festival. Von's group was playing that night, headlining, and also on the festival that year, which was curated by John Corbett, who's an organizer in Chicago and a writer and good friend of mine. John had curated a really fantastic festival that year with Roy Haynes was on it, Jim Hall and Charlie Hayden, The Thing with Mats Gustafsson and Paul Nilsson-Love and Ingebrigt Tokerflaten, Jason Moran and the Bandwagon, Ab Bar's Trio, Toby Delius Quartet, Milford Graves and Peter Broeksman. It was really an incredible festival to be at. And Von was playing with his regular quartet, so I actually got to see this performance that I bumped into a YouTube clip of, and that was really beautiful. For our performance there, Paul Nilsson-Love had unfortunately gotten sick right before this and couldn't make it at the last minute. And so Paul Litton was there. Anyone who knows Paul Litton may know that he's very much associated with the English School of Free Improvising, which oftentimes does not involve playing any type of beat or rhythms, explicit types of rhythms, and a lot of Ken's charts were very dependent on Paul Nilsson-Love basically holding down the time while Paul Litton would kind of play color around that. And so not having Paul Nilsson-Love in the band presented quite a problem for the band in terms of how we were going to navigate these very complicated charts that were very much based in steady rhythmic meter. And Paul Litton stepped up and he did an absolutely incredible job taking over as a big band drummer and really held it down for the entire band. If you know about big band drumming, it's kind of a specific school where everybody in the band is listening to the drummer to hold it together, because many times you're set up so far apart from one another that you can't really hear each other. So you're really relying on the drummer to kind of hold things down. And Paul Litton did an absolutely fantastic job of that without sacrificing any of his own personal touches, shall we say, on the instrument. So that was kind of amazing. At the same time, the FMP Fest was happening in Berlin, which was the Total Music Meeting, which was originally launched as kind of a counter festival to the Berlin Jazz Festival. And so the fact that John Corbett, who's somebody who's very much a part of the out music scene and the FMP scene, was also curating the Berlin Festival at that time, meant that there were a lot of incredible musicians even beyond the Berlin Festival in town. So Cecil Taylor and Tony Oxley were there playing duo. The Schlippenbach Trio with Alexander von Schlippenbach, Paul Lovins and Evan Parker was there playing in the extended lineup with basically joined by what's more or less the Evan Parker trio with Paul Litton and Barry Guy on bass. So I had a chance to see that band play as well. I think Paul Litton that weekend, between playing his own concerts and playing basically all of the concerts for Paul Nilsson Love, I think he played 8 concerts in 3 days, not to mention 2 like 5-hour rehearsals with Ken's band. So he had to be really extremely worn out at the end of that weekend, but he did an incredible job in all of them. And one of the sets that I got to see was The Thing, with Mats Gustafsson and Ingebrigt Åkerflaten and Paul Litton on drums, subbing for Paul Nilsson Love, joined by Joe McPhee. And it was kind of beautiful because in that afternoon before they played it at the hotel we were all staying at, Charlie Hayden showed up with his bass, had just flown in and landed and come to the hotel, and Ingebrigt Åkerflaten ran into him in the hotel lobby. And, of course, Charlie Hayden is a hero to any bass player in jazz. And Ingebrigt, went up to him and, said, basically, thanks for the music, I'm a big fan, and mentioned that he was playing a concert that night if Charlie Hayden wanted to come. And so Charlie Hayden actually showed up for The Thing that night at a club in Berlin, sat right up front, and completely freaked Ingebrigt out, which was super great. So going back to Von Freeman, the clip I mentioned originally, the one from the Chicago Jazz Festival, was with Clifford Jordan. If you know Clifford Jordan, he was an integral part of Charlie Mingus's sextet in the 1960s with Eric Dolphy and Johnny Coles and Danny Richmond and Jackie Byard. That got me thinking a little bit about my own exposure to Mingus and becoming familiar with him. He was one of the first people that I ever got a recording by. When I was young, I was very lucky when I hit high school to start playing in a small jazz combo at a local music school called the Rivers School of Music just outside of Boston. And it was a great program where we weren't just playing like big band charts and reading things and, like your high school jazz band, you basically just read charts down and, maybe play like a 12-bar solo. Oftentimes those were actually even written out in the charts. So there wasn't really a lot of improvising involved. But at this combo I was playing in at the Rivers Music School, it was, we were creating our own arrangements from the real book, we'd have the head and the chord changes, we'd make our own arrangements, and it was really about improvising the way jazz musicians actually do. And so that's where I really learned a lot. That On Green Dolphin Street was a tune we did with that band. I had the opportunity to do participate in workshops led by the great Danilo Perez, who's a fantastic piano player from Panama. He was teaching in Boston at that time at Berklee College of Music, and he was really an up-and-coming star in the jazz world at that point, and he came and did a workshop with us. George Garzone, the fantastic Boston-based tenor saxophonist who led the band The Fringe for many years, also came and did a workshop. So it was kind of an opportunity for me as a young musician to really work with some very, very heavy people and really get into jazz improvisation. And one summer we tackled a few tunes from the Mingus record we did, as I remember, Better Get It in Your Soul, and we did Fables of Faubus, which I think is not on, maybe that's also on my favorite version of it is on Mingus Present Mingus. But another tune we did was Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, which is the ballad that Charles Mingus wrote for Lester Young when he passed away, I believe in 1958. And it's an absolutely beautiful ballad. The first time I heard it was on that record, and Burka Irvin is the tenor saxophone player in that particular version of the Mingus Sextet. And the whole solo is gorgeous, but particularly at the beginning of the second chorus, he does this thing with a trill on the tenor that's just one of the most beautiful moments that I've ever heard in a solo, and just one of those moments on a recording that really changes your life and your conception of what's possible on an instrument. So I've always really loved this tune, and we played it way back then. I don't think I've played it since. So I want to play a version of Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. Thanks. That was Goodbye Pork Pie Hat by the great Charles Mingus. Got one more piece for you tonight. This one came to mind because I had the privilege this past weekend to see a bunch of different concerts. I work in production with the Hyde Park Jazz Festival as my day job. That festival is coming up at the end of September on the 26th and 27th in a somewhat scaled back version compared to what we normally do. And so over the summer we've been organizing a lot of different pop-up concerts around Chicago. This past weekend we had on Saturday an event called Back Alley Jazz, which is based around the South Shore neighborhood in Chicago. And there were 8 performances as part of that. I got to see Isaiah Collier and Dee Alexander and Rajiv Halim all play with their bands. On Sunday, we had 5 different what we're calling jazz postcards, which are basically pop-ups where we just ask an artist to pick a location that has some kind of meaning to them and do a half-hour pop-up concert. And so Avriel Ra was one of the people we asked to organize something, and he asked Ed Wilkerson, the great reed player, to come out and do a sunrise concert out on the lake at 65th and Promontory by the La Rabida Children's Hospital. And so I got there at about 5:45, 5:30, 5:45 on Sunday morning, and it was absolutely the most beautiful sunrise I can describe. Just totally perfect. The two of them were set up on the sidewalk, kind of by the retaining wall that overlooks the lake, and it just couldn't have been a more beautiful morning and event. That'll actually be up on the Hyde Park Jazz Festival website pretty soon. You can check out the video of that, which I took, by the way, so be sure to check that out. And the image of that, the two of them playing and the sun coming up, really reminded me of Interstellar Space, the great Coltrane record, one of his last records. It just really looked like that record cover to me. And so I started going back this week and listening to some of that stuff. And it was a reminder of, how much I listened to that stuff when I was a kid and how much it still really affects my language so much on the horn today. Another record that was later released from sessions around the same time is called Stellar Regions, which came out on Impulse, I believe, in 1994. And it features a quartet with Coltrane on saxophones, Alice Coltrane on piano, Jimmy Garrison on bass, and Rashid Ali on drums. So it's a little bit stripped back version of the band that Coltrane had been working with in those late years, which was with Pharoah Sanders and a slightly more extended lineup basically. And so this is the quartet record, and the way they approach the tunes on it is really quite interesting. It sounds like late period Coltrane, except instead of doing half-hour long pieces, they really boil it down to these short, like 4 and 5 minute pieces. And I noticed probably about 20 years ago now, a friend of mine, Kevin Whitehead, who's a great writer and had a radio show on the local station WNUR out of Northwestern, he played a track off this record on the radio, and I realized Coltrane's not playing tenor on this track, he's playing alto, which is pretty rare. He did that on a couple records late in his career, like Live in Japan, for example. But on the actual record itself, released by Impulse, they don't even credit it as alto. They just credit him as playing tenor saxophone, which is totally inaccurate and a massive oversight considering how many people must have listened to those master tapes before they put it out and didn't even realize that it was an alto saxophone. So I want to play that tune right now. It's called Train Sonic, and it's off of Stellar Regions. So be sure to check that record out as well. And this is the last tune of mine for tonight. So thanks for tuning in. Oh, I do want to mention once again, the new record this week is the Rempis Percussion Quartet. It's called The Long Haul. The inspiration for that is basically the COVID era, which is proving to be a long haul. You can find that recording and much of my other work at aerophonicrecords.com. For that recording, you can check out the digital releases page. Do be sure to also check out all the hard copy releases. Since I started the label in 2013, we've had 28 now hard copy releases. The newest one came out in early August, and the official release date for that is next week. But yeah, be sure to check all that stuff out. Thank you again for tuning in. This is Train Sonic off the record Stellar Regions by John Coltrane. Thank you very much. That was Train Sonic by John Coltrane off of Stellar Regions. Really appreciate everybody being here tonight. A couple upcoming things to check out this Friday. I'll be playing duo with Tyler Damon live in Chicago. If you want the address for that, just drop me a message. That'll be streaming on Instagram at Dave Rempis. And this Sunday I'll be playing duo with Tim Daisy up in Milwaukee. That's going to be at 5 p.m. and that'll be streaming right here on Twitch. I am going to be taking a break at this point from some of these weekly digital releases. I honestly didn't really think that this era was going to go quite this long, and it has been a lot of work to put out a new record each week. So I'm going to slow the pace down on that a little bit and probably move back to more like a monthly release schedule. And for the time being, I'm also going to put a little end to the weekly streams to focus on outdoor events while we can still do them. I'm going to continue this Friday night thing with Tyler Damon in the park near my house, and so I'll keep streaming that. And I'm sure that I will be back with these Wednesday night streams probably in October at some point in the fall, but for now I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break. I sincerely appreciate everybody who's been coming back week after week for these. Can't tell you guys enough how much it means to me to be able to continue to work on music in the capacity that I can, to have an audience for it. All the messages that I get from everybody who's been watching it, I just sincerely want to say thank you for all of that support during this time. It's a strange time, and all of you have given me so much energy to like keep doing things and keep moving. So keep it up. I will be back soon, I promise. And thank you again for all of your support in this. I'm going to take us out tonight with some more Von Freeman. This is a beautiful version of the tune, The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. This is also off that 1972 record, Doing It Right Now. So check that out, and thank you again for being here. Take care, everyone.